Antarctica is the continent wrapped with eternal cold. However, even in such extreme climatic conditions, there are animals that do perfectly well. In this episode, you'll learn about the most interesting inhabitants of Antarctica. Exploring Antarctica is always something incredibly interesting, and the summer 2023 expedition was no exception to this rule. In mid-August, scientists discovered a completely new species that looked incredibly interesting and frightening at the same time. Its main feature is 20 arms resembling tentacles. Part of them are pinnate, the other part is covered with tubercles. The total length of the creature is unknown, but the found individual reached 8 inches. According to experts, this organism may well be very young. This is why it doesn't stand out for its size. People entered the DNA results into a supercomputer and asked what this monster could look like if it had grown up a little more. They were shocked by what they saw. Do you think it's even real, or did the computer malfunction? Write in the comments. Anyway, I propose to move a little away from mysticism and mysteries and look at the real amazing creatures found in the great outdoors covered by ice. One of them is the Ulegiska gigantea, a species of marine worms. But please don't think that because it's a worm it's easy to kill. In general, it doesn't stand out so much. In fact, it's quite the opposite. The species lives where we would not last even 10 seconds. First of all, this monster is settled at a great depth, about 1,600 to 2,000 feet. The species was discovered in the first half of the 20th century, but during this time it was studied only superficially. For example, people learned that in addition to doing nothing, this worm eats. Shocking piece of news, isn't it? But okay, let's not pick on the scientists. It was with their help that we at least saw the mouth of this monster. This means it's a very good eater. Only this, the mouth is not at the head. In front of us is part of the body, a folding throat. During the hunt, this monster, similar to the alien, throws it forward, grabbing an innocent victim. While the worm peacefully plies the waters, the deadly apparatus is hidden inside the shields so that Ulegiska gigantea does not attract unnecessary attention. Other arms of a lighter color are needed to this monster for 2 purposes. One of them is movement. They serve as fins. With their help, you can also walk on the bottom in an extreme case. The second purpose is, of course, defense. Branches form a fairly dense layer that's not easy to penetrate even for the toothiest predators. Leave a like if you also find this monster one of the most unusual and at the same time nasty of all that's been discovered by scientists. We've already talked about a mysterious monster and worms. Who are we forgetting? Well, that's right, snailfish. These are other insanely unpleasant creatures that, alas, exist in our world. Except that the slugs I'm about to tell you about are even worse than those you know. To begin with, they live at a depth of 5 miles. That's pretty deep, isn't it? By comparison, if a man goes down to a depth of only 320 feet, his lungs would shrink to the size of a baseball. At the same time, snailfish feel quite well at this depth. Their bodies are filled with antifreeze and can withstand 800 times the atmospheric pressure. There are about 300 species in their family, and they're all unique in their own way. For that matter, according to scientists, the range of snailfish is wider than any other family of fish known to science. That's why the creatures look very different. Each species has adapted to its own habitat, and very little's known about any of them. There are only 2 things that unite them. The first is the features of the structure. In any case, no matter what kind of snailfish may be in front of you, they all look like tadpoles. And secondly, any specimens of this species are the best ocean sanitarians. The basis of their diet is undernourished, sunken carcasses. The smallest of these guys is Leparus inquinillus, a species inhabiting shallow waters. It's less than 2 inches long. This is especially surprising if you know that in the same family, there are species up to 1.5 feet long. But take it from me, the fact that someone out there grows up to 1.5 feet long is not the most intriguing thing. One of the deepest members of the family, Pseudoleparus severi, has invented its own method of dealing with pressure. To cope, it creates the same pressure inside itself. So if you take this snailfish outside, it will simply explode like an inflatable balloon. It's not hard to guess why scientists have never been able to study it properly. We all know about sharks, predatory creatures from the world's oceans that few people can do anything against. But did you know that the South Pole has its own sharks, ready to compete for the title of the most voracious and dangerous creatures? That's what I'm going to tell you about. The name of this fish is Antarctic toothfish. As you can see by its name, it grew up in the harsh conditions of Antarctica. This fish, roaming the area at any depth, is 6.5 feet long and weighs up to 330 pounds. In the Southern Ocean, this voracious creature occupies the ecological niche of sharks and eats everyone it meets on the way. The fish has perfect eyesight and a sense of smell. By the way, even relatives can fall into its merciless jaws. It's not squeamish about this. On the other hand, what did you want from a creature that's considered the largest among all modern South Polar fish? Apparently, in childhood, it reads books about sharks and wanted to become as cool as them. The creature got rid of the swim bladder because its idol didn't have it and grew the sharpest teeth. They leave their enemies such severe injuries it's no longer possible to recover from. Despite this, the Antarctic toothfish has not forgotten its own tricks. They were not borrowed from anybody else. For example, the fish clearly controls its weight and allocates a specific amount of percent for fat. This adds a kind of buoyancy, thanks to which the toothfish sometimes does not spend unnecessary energy for swimming and saves it until the moment of hunting or self-defense. By the way, it's due to fat in the body that the fish is also able to dive to a depth of 1.2 miles without much effort and then surface again without problems. And since, I remind you, the creature lives in cold waters, it had to learn to cope with low temperatures. The Antarctic toothfish solved this problem quite elegantly. It added natural antifreeze to its blood. Those are proteins that stop the crystallization of water in the cells. Because of this, nothing freezes inside its body and it feels great. The main thing after all these creatures, don't start thinking that life in this cold region flows only at great depths. That's not true at all. There's plenty of life on land too. Consider the Adelie penguins as an example. They were discovered in the mid-19th century. Adelie is such a medium-sized bird which usually reaches 24 to 28 inches in height and weighs no more than 13 pounds. It has a characteristic thin white ring around the eye. The head, neck, back, and flippers of these penguins are black with a characteristic bluish tinge, while the chest and belly are white. These handsome penguins usually live no more than 12 years, but for such a seemingly short period of life, they manage to do a lot of interesting things, about which I'll tell you further. Let's start with the fact that these penguins are quite successful guys who easily get along in a cold region. Of course, there are reasons for this. For example, the same black and white suit can easily withstand temperatures even as low as 140 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. However, this is not to say that Adelie penguins love the frosty freshness. When it's too cold outside, they sink into the water and survive months there. They hunt for fish, krill, and a variety of jellyfish. And although by standard they do not swim too fast, no more than 6 miles an hour, if necessary, penguins can accelerate up to 43 miles an hour and catch up with a hardy and tasty prey. In addition to hunting, such acceleration is also necessary for self-defense. No doubt you've seen videos on the internet where poor penguins are hunted by orcas. It's a heartbreaking sight, but that's just the way it is. Having noticed an orca, penguins accelerate with their last bit of strength and, as a rule, jump on an iceberg. There, they wait until the orcas lose interest in them. However, this is not always successful. Their opponents are very clever and resourceful. However, that's another story. If not to take into account this unpleasant detail, otherwise they live their 12 years quite joyfully and happily. The costume birds are monogamous, but there are exceptions. Spotting a familiar beak in a crowd of 250,000 individuals is a stupid hardest problem. So even if the penguin couple loses each other, they won't worry about it for long. It's only natural for them. Penguins will go for a walk, think about life, find a beautiful pebble, and try to attract a new soulmate. Sooner or later, it'll bite, and the two birds will form a new happy family. In addition to the continuation of the species, another important task will be the arrangement of the nest, and this is a separate story. It's said that females can trade their bodies for pebbles they build their house from, and the male can venture on a theft with their neighbors away on business and steal a stone from them for nothing. And now we'll talk about the main link of the food chain in the Antarctic and probably the most numerous species on the planet. Its total biomass is estimated at 120 to 750 million tons. And this is not some famous fish or other creature that's always out there. It's an ordinary Antarctic krill. The largest creatures from this family are crustaceans, no more than 2 inches long, weighing only a couple of grams. And now imagine how many of them are needed to make the total weight exceed 700 million tons. Krill have entirely colonized southern waters, but most of all are found under perennial sea ice. However, it's not without surprises from nature, and if suddenly the iceberg leaves the cool waters, krill carefully slides off it. Otherwise, the organism will overheat, which is not needed. And even though the creatures move away from such an appetizing iceberg, they can still find something to eat. Free-floating plankton, carrion, other crustaceans, and even their own brethren, anyone will do for a hearty meal. Giant squid. Yes, we can call our next guest this way, or we can call it Massanicatuthus. In any case, before us is a real giant of the underwater world, living in the ice at a depth of several thousand feet. According to estimates of professionals, the maximum length of this big guy can go beyond 32 feet and perhaps even all 46 feet. An interesting feature of all giant, as well as all Antarctic and deep-sea squids, is the presence of ammonium chloride in their body, compound that gives their body additional buoyancy. Unlike smaller squids, these creatures have little to worry about in the water. They'll just float effortlessly in the water, float, and not even accelerate for hunting. They solve the problem with food with the help of their luminous organ, photophore. It attracts fish and other small creatures, so squids have nothing to do but swallow them. And although on such a diet this creature grows to an incredible size, it cannot be called dangerous. It's always considered an easy prey and tasty for other giants like sperm whales. Squids for them are like a sweet jelly, which does not mind that you eat it. After all, the only hard part of their body is their beak, which they use to pulverize their prey. Arctic tern. Give me a like if you too are sad every time summer's gone. If so, I suggest that you dream of becoming an Arctic tern in your next life. This feathered bird consistently survives 2 summers a year. How's that possible? Let me tell you. This small bird from the gull family starts its journey in August, leaves the northern shores, and flies south. Yes, of course, the birds have an incredibly difficult journey ahead of them. In addition to weather conditions, they have to fly thousands of miles. It usually takes a month. It's curious that they have a pre-traveled route in their journey from the Arctic to Antarctica. Of course, no navigator helps them in this case. The birds use as reference islands, different reefs, or some other local attractions. But as scientists say, there's another method helping them fly. It's astronavigation. Arctic terns track their direction by the sun, even though they have a whole host of variables to consider, latitude and longitude, as well as the current date. Of course, they don't do any complex calculations, but their internal clocks tell them the right way anyway. And in fact, if you find out what else they can do, orientation by the sun will not seem too difficult. Arctic terns are said to be able to sense the Earth's magnetic lines. We don't know how exactly they determine the strength and intensity of the magnetic field, but their sensor cells are in their eyes. I wish I knew as much about other creatures on our Earth as I do about the Arctic tern, but no, some of them are just impossible to study. That snailfish that explodes if you pull it onto land, or the hourglass dolphin, for example. The thing is that these creatures have gotten so far south that they've almost deprived biologists of the opportunity to study them. It remains to be based only on the stories of fishermen or notes of eyewitnesses. The pattern on the body of these creatures resembles an hourglass or Maltese cross, thanks to which the dolphins got their name. They regularly gather in groups of 5 to 10 individuals and head for fin whales. No, not to have a more successful hunt or to learn how to fight. These dolphins enjoy riding the big waves that the giants create. And no, it's not a stupid decision at all. The fact is that the hourglass dolphin has almost no enemies in the natural environment, so they do what brings them maximum joy. And that's about it. Write in the comments which of the creatures impressed you most of all. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel.